In the mid-1990s, 5 girls turned pop music on its head. Each of the Spice Girls was incredibly ambitious, but they had no idea they would become the most successful female pop act of all time.
It was kind of almost like Beatlemania for a while.
They made it kind of cool to be a girl again, you know, like girl power.
It was a real high-concept triumph.
But that triumph was short-lived. One of the girls' ambitions soared above the rest, and girl power was about to implode. It was May 31st, 1998. Geri Halliwell, 1/5 of the British group Spice Girls, inexplicably walked out.
Of course she was going to leave. She was far more, I mean, I guess they describe her as overbearing, but she was far more out there than the rest of them were.
At the time, the Spice Girls were the biggest pop group in the world. In just 2 short years, the 5 unknown girls who had taken the world by storm were in turmoil. Before the Spice Girls arrived on the scene, the British music industry was in serious trouble.
The second half of the 90s was the worst period for British artists overseas since before the Beatles. There was a real shortage of export. As the head of one of the major labels put it famously, Britpop is a Brit flop.
The 2 dominant genres of music worldwide were being produced in America, grunge and hip-hop, as exemplified by bands like Nirvana and NWA.
Neither of these forms was good for preteens or pretens. Consequently, there's a massive gap in the market.
This gap was partially filled in Britain when the surge of boy bands like Take That arrived.
It was all about boy bands. And it was just the done thing that you put good-looking boys on the cover of your magazine. That was the rule. That was the way it was done. They wanted to stick with something that was reliable. They could rely on boys selling magazines.
There was a massive gap in the market for a girl group, and the race was on, not only to discover, but to create the nation's next superstars. On February 24th, 1994, British talent managers Bob and Chris Herbert placed this ad in the leading performing arts trade paper, The Stage.
We went through a whole process of auditions, much like you've probably seen on, you know, being rolled out on TV nowadays.
After a lengthy audition process, the Herberts handpicked their final 5.
So the final 5 that only from the audition process were Victoria, Mel C, Mel B, Emma and Geri. Geri, to this day, I don't know how she actually made it into the group and made it through all those preliminary rounds of auditions, because she had the least talent and actually didn't even attend one of those auditions. She managed, each time she would ring up with an excuse that she had laryngitis or chicken pox or whatever, and kind of fast-tracked her way through it. You know, I asked her name and she said Geri, and we said how old. She said, look, I could be as young as you want. You know, I could be a 16-year-old with big tits, or I can be, you know, as old as you want, sort of thing.
The Herberts named the group Touch, and they moved the girls into a house in Maidenhead, on the outskirts of London.
When you audition for girls and you put them together and they all live together, you get an interesting dynamic happens. You get all kinds of things falling into sync, you know, in terms of how they deal with each other and the way that they deal with each other's ego and temperament and stuff. So there's a different dynamic comes into play at that point that you don't get from conventional relationships or friendships.
That time, the much talked about time when they were all put together in a house in the middle of nowhere and they had to bond and they had to get on, must have been a very interesting time, and but it worked. And he could see them then at close quarters, see what their personalities were like.
Up to this point, each of the girls' lives were focused towards becoming famous. Melanie Chisholm, Emma Bunton, and Victoria Adams were all studying at performing arts colleges. Melanie Brown was a dancer at a holiday resort, while Geri Halliwell was a television game show host in Turkey. The Herberts were desperate for the girls to be a success, so they immediately put them through their paces.
They'll get up, they'll go to the gym, all piled into Geri's little beaten up sort of Fiat, down to the gym, and then after they'd been to the gym, they would come down to the studio, which was in Nap Hill, a place called Trinity Studios. It was a perfect place for us to, without kind of going into London and people, you know, sort of prying eyes and that, just to kind of get on and do what we needed to do.